Hi there, welcome to the Lovefly Fear of Flying Q&A. Paul Tizard here, one of the Lovefly humans that's here to help you, hopefully, and support you. So, first things first, as always, welcome to all the new humans that have joined us. It is a massive welcome from me and everybody else at Lovefly. So grateful that you've come through and you found us, because there are other groups out there, but we like to think we try and do things a little bit different. So huge welcome and hope you get what you need. Do you know our philosophy or some of the things that we think about, we talk about, the fact that we don't think there's anything wrong with you, although, technically, clinically, fear of flying is classified as a clinical condition. But one of the ways that we think about fear of flying is that you've got into bad habits, and over time you repeat these and you get better and better at doing them until they become fairly fixed and entrenched. But there's nothing wrong with you. Accepted that some of you have more challenges as well to deal with, so such as some of you will be carrying other forms of anxiety as well, like generalized anxiety. But when it comes to fear of flying, we think and we know that it's totally recoverable, so we know that when people do the right things over a period and they chip away at the fear, that they can get rid of it. And that's one of the things that we found time and time again, and we've seen so many people now that have been able to achieve that. So don't give up is the thing I want to say, is that even if it feels hopeless sometimes and you think, crikey, I'm always going to have this fear of flying, I've got to live with this, it's not the case. So many people have managed to beat their fear for all sorts of ways. Sometimes it's just listening to our podcasts and being part of this Lovefly group as well, or following the Instagram at Lovefly Help page. That's enough, so Facebook group, the Lovefly page, and the podcast, the Lovefly podcast, has been enough to help many, many people. Others have found they needed a little bit more of an intervention. So because we run the 30-day self-coach program, and we've got the instant webinar download as well, which are on our lovefly.co.uk website for those who are ready and want that little bit extra help. Because we know that actually just going through the process and chipping away at the fear means that you can turn this around. And it doesn't seem to be about what the level of fear is, because I've seen people with like mild, recently acquired fears right through to really pronounced, long entrenched 30 to 40-year fears. And I think one of the critical things is that it seems to be when you're ready and you have that motivation, either you're going towards something which is really important and meaningful, which actually, when it's backed up with, there's a real strong consequence if you don't get over the fear. The combination of those and someone being ready seems to be the factor which turns the corner, and that person then able to then embrace some of the things that's available. But it is a sustained, continued effort that is required to get over something like this. And like anything, like if you were to go on a diet or a fitness regime, that you can get into some good habits, but you got to keep them up. It's not a given. You can't just like do it and that's it. You've got to always be thinking, right, I've got to keep doing the work. I've got to keep chipping away at this thing. And I can't afford ever the luxury of going back to watching those bloody programs, air crash investigation, or checking weather apps and doing all those things which are unhelpful. Yeah. So that you've got to keep doing that sort of stuff. I don't know where all that came from, but I just felt I needed to say it. So, a couple of questions this week in the Faceback Doodah. A couple of questions that came up. So one I can answer, one I don't know what to say. So I've tried to get a more of an official answer, but it hasn't come through yet. So Sarah has said, how do you cope with anticipatory anxiety? That's the worst for me. It ruins the whole build-up. And a couple of things I want to say. So Christopher has also come on and said that's the same for me. And I was going to talk about that, but I saw a post earlier which actually has that the poster has put something on here. So Melissa Twigden, who's flying somewhere at the moment, somewhere exotic, she put a post up this morning talking about anticipatory anxiety and what to do about it and what her tips have been. And one of the things I took from that article, it was actually in the Lovefly Facebook group, was that anticipatory anxiety passes. It doesn't stick around. It does come in waves, and always thought that. And the other thing I'll say about it, and there's a lot to be said about this because a lot of people have spoken about this, is the fact that anticipatory anxiety, all anxiety is anticipatory, because if it's in the moment, then it's fear. So for example, if you were on a flight and something happened that was scary, you wouldn't be anxious about it. You'd be dealing with the fear. You'd be dealing with it, but everything up until that point is in your head. So we call it anticipatory anxiety, but all anxiety is like that because it's not real. It's what you imagine is real. Now, just be careful here. I'm not stray out of my lane because this is Susan's area. But everything that's happening before you get on a plane is in your head. It's not real. It's just what you're telling yourself. And the thing is, you can't, well, that's easy for you to say. Well, it is easy for you to say, but you're practicing it. So if you look at it like as a rational thing, right? You're practicing how to be scared about something that you've got coming up. So if you're going for a job interview and you kept thinking, oh my God, I'm going to stuff this up. I know I'm just going to come out with ridiculous things. I know I'm going to really mess it. I know I'm going to be a nervous wreck. I know I won't be able to think clearly. I know this. And all of these sort of phrases, you'd be practicing how to stuff up that interview. And then no surprise, you'd get in there and you'd stuff it up. And it's the same with flying as well. So even if you don't believe it, you've got to practice visualizing flights going well. I'm imagining myself walking on, being relaxed, looking around, smiling at people. I'm taking out the snacks that I brought with me. I'm sitting down and making the space ready. So you've got to practice that stuff because that's what you want. If you keep practicing what you don't want, lo and behold, you will get more of it. So you pay attention, you get what you pay attention to. So you keep paying attention to stuff that you don't want, you'll get more of it. And that sounds really obvious, but you've got to start somewhere. Why not start today? One of the things that you can do, and that was the whole point of episode 44 of the Lovefly podcast episodes, was to rehearse being relaxed. So visualizing being on an aircraft. So ways that you can do this, you could just do some deep breathing and watch lots of takeoff and landing videos. And that would help you because you'd be practicing looking at a feared thing whilst relaxing yourself. And the reason for that is you're trying to sort of counter program your automatic reactions. Now, you don't have to believe me, but I just know that this stuff works over time. And no one is beyond being able to get over their fear of flying. There's no reason. It's not like genetically programmed into you. You might have been born with a more predisposition towards being a little bit anxious, that some people are, but none of us were born with this fear of flying. It's something that's learned. Sometimes you don't remember learning it, but it's definitely learned. And the good news is, I've always said this, that if you've learned something, you can always learn something new. So that's my tip with anticipatory anxiety. It does pass, and it is just practicing how to be scared. So we have to start at some point practicing how not to be scared and never stop practicing. And that's why we did episode 44, which is the last chapter of the audio book, which is episode 69, as it happens. Right, next question. Don't worry, I went off with that. Okay, so Catherine's asked a question and she says, this is not a ridiculous question. It's actually a really good question, but I don't know the answer. I've got a fair idea, but what I've done is I've emailed the head of passenger health and just said, any ideas? So here we go. So yesterday, Niger closed their airspace. 3 flights from Johannesburg to Heathrow were diverted. 2 British Airways turned back and Virgin was diverted to Lagos. what happens when people are taken from a country where there is 0 to very low risk of malaria and put in a country what's classed as high risk? How do they keep the passengers safe? I've tried to find out as much as I can, but I'm coming up empty. Hope you can help. Okay, so I don't know the specific answer to this, but what I would say is this, is that there's nothing that's done in commercial aviation where we take any chances. So if we had to do this, then we'd have a plan. And that's the thing I think that I love about commercial aviation. There's always a plan and there's a backup plan. So if this is something which has happened, which obviously that's what you're saying it has, I wasn't aware of that, there will be a plan. This will be thought about and there'll be some other contingency. So I don't know what the answer is specifically. So I've asked somebody to answer that. And if I find it out, I'll stick it in this group that found it, just to say, is this helpful? But that's as much as I can say about it. So I always say with any scenario, always ask the question, but then you've got to think, I'm asking a very detailed question, which is kind of reassuring in a way that we're getting to the level where we're asking about diversions on aircraft that we're not on. What can happen though is when we're looking for answers all the time is we never actually get all the answers we want. So there has to come a point where you have to go, do you know what? Fundamentally, do I trust these people or not? And it's a straight yes or no. And there's only so much information you'll be able to find out, and you will never have all the answers. So at some point you have to decide, do I trust these people? And that's why I say, listen to the podcast, listen to the sort of people that we get to interview and say, would you trust them? Do they sound like competent professional humans? And the answer has to be yes, doesn't it? They're all a bunch of professionals that are looking after you. So talking of podcasts, there is, I had a very lucky to do a few interviews last week. And who did I speak to? Who should we release this week? Oh, big question. So we've managed to secure an interview with Catherine from Elevate Her. She was in the BBC UK press about promoting female pilots. So she's coming on at the end of August. I saw that, and then it was in our feed as well in the Facebook group. I think I saw it, and on the Instagram, someone said, "Oh, we've got to get this person on." So we did, and we've asked her, and that's the earliest she could do. But last week we also spoke to Noel Phillips. I know some of you have mentioned him, and so I think I'll probably release that one this week, and he's talking about what it's like for him flying all over the place. And I know a lot of you watch his videos to sort of normalize flying. So he's going to come on and talk about that. So that's that interview. We also got an interview this week with a company called Medair, and they do that. That's the link up. So when you're up in the air, a lot of people are worried about this. It's like, what happens medically? So they're going to talk about their amazing service, and that is hopefully it's booked in the calendar at the moment for Thursday. So we'll be able to tell you a little bit more about how medical diversions help emergencies, what's available to help you, what all the cabin crew are trained in, and how it all links up to this sort of hospital on the ground. So we've often talked about this, but this was an idea that John had, who you'll see is prolific in the Facebook group. And he's said, well, we get the Medair link, the MedLink people come in and Medair, so we've got it. So there you go. So John has actually put a post in Facebook to say, if you've got any questions or anything you'd like answered on a podcast, please suggest them. So we'd love to hear those as well. Who else did I've spoken to 2 other people as well this week, but I'll tell you about those next week. And yes, it's very exciting getting some really interesting interviews. We've got a potential aircraft engineer as well. He's agreed we're just trying to sort out dates. So I know that's something I've wanted for a long time, but that also came up in the group recently, groups, to say that that's something that you'd like to hear from. I think that's it for now. But yes, thank you very much for watching. And take care of yourself and look out for the podcast on Wednesday morning at 7 o'clock when that drops with Noel Phillips. Take care for now.